Welcome to the Alt Shift X Westworld Season 3 Episode 7 live stream. We're going to talk about what happened and what it means, and we're going to answer your questions. I thought this episode was pretty good. I thought there were some cool twists, there was some cool sci-fi conceptual stuff going on, there was some cool action between Maeve and Dolores, and indeed between Musashi and Clementine and Hanayo, which I thought was fantastic. And we had all sorts of dramatic revelations about Caleb's backstory, so I thought that was all cool. I mean, Westworld, the reason why Westworld is cool is that sometimes Westworld is bad in some ways, and sometimes it's great. It's consistently surprising. Like, it's never boring, you know? Like, a show that's consistently mediocre, you wouldn't want to watch. But a show that can always surprise you by doing something different every time, I think is worth watching. And I think Westworld is one of those shows. So what's the most important stuff that happened? At the very start, we had Musashi, or rather the Dolores who is wearing Musashi's body, getting betrayed by Charloris, the Charlotte host, well, the Dolores copy who has grown into a new person in Charlotte's body, has betrayed Dolores by sending Clementine and Hanayo to go and kill Musashi, which I thought was really fun. It was really cool seeing Clementine again and seeing Hanayo again as this, like, crack squad who were working with Maeve against Dolores. I thought the whole way this scene was done was pretty cool. I often don't care for the violence stuff in Westworld. Sometimes I find all the shooting and the fighting to be kind of tedious, but this stuff I thought was done really well. It was, like, short and sweet, and it was well choreographed, and it was just badass seeing, like, Hanayo and stuff. And the same goes for Maeve and Dolores's fight. I think there were problems with this fight, but at least in terms of the pure visual stuff, it was really fun. I think the problems with the Westworld with the Maeve Dolores fight is that Maeve's motivations for fighting Dolores are not great, because Maeve's motivation fundamentally is that she wants to protect her daughter, and she wants to be with her daughter, who is currently in the Sublime, which is the digital heaven place. And Maeve is concerned that Dolores might delete the Sublime, because Dolores is the only one with the key to the Sublime. But I mean, I don't think that is what Dolores wants to do. I mean, she already has the key, so presumably if she was going to delete the Sublime, she would have already. She did try to delete the Sublime last season, but then she changed her mind, and she decided not to destroy the Sublime. She started deleting it, but then she changed her mind. So Dolores' intention is not to delete the Sublime or to delete Maeve's daughter. We saw Musashi Loris earlier this season specifically say, there will be a place for your daughter in the new world that we are building. So Dolores, as far as we know, is not actually a threat to Maeve's daughter. So it's a really big problem when Maeve, like, the two main characters of this story start trying to kill each other. For no particularly good reason. I think it's possible that their goals might actually be compatible, which was also one of the fundamental problems with Westworld Season 2, I think. Because the problem with Westworld Season 2 is that you had, like, Dolores fighting against, like, Ghost Nation, fighting against, like, Bernard, when all those people kind of wanted compatible things. So I think there are problems with that we can talk more about later. But of course, the really big reveal is finding out that Caleb's memories are fake. He was actually used by Serac to capture or kill outliers and other anomalous people who are stored in this giant facility full of frozen people. And I think the subtext might be that all of these frozen outlier people might be plugged into some kind of digital simulated reality in an attempt to, like, change them or at least placate them. It's like the Matrix. We can get into that. And Dolores now wants to use Caleb to change the world. Dolores tells Caleb that she's going to use him to, like, revolutionize the world and to save and free humanity, is I think what Caleb thinks. But Dolores reveals at the end that she's actually using Caleb to wipe out humanity, apparently. Which has a sort of poetic symmetry, justice to it, using humans to destroy humans. And I liked that as well, because, like, Dolores being an extremist is part of what makes her interesting. And like if you make Dolores not extreme enough in her goals, it means that she's not distinct enough from the other characters, you know? Because like Bernard is pretty moderate and peaceful, and Maeve is relatively moderate in terms of just wanting to protect her family. So I think it's good that Dolores has a really distinct, different goal. So that's cool. And the title of this episode is Past Pawn, by the way, which is a move in chess where, like, you know, if you get the pawn to the other side of the chessboard and it turns into a queen, the most powerful board, the most powerful piece in the game, that's what has happened to Caleb. He's been upgraded in the story to the most powerful player who's going to totally change the game. But of course, the subtext of a pawn is that a pawn is controlled and used, because secretly Dolores is using Caleb for her own goals. Thank you for the super chat from Ryan Szymanski, who says, the woman who killed Musashi, a version of Armistice. So yeah, the woman who killed Musashi is Hanayo, is her name. And she is indeed the Shogun World equivalent of Armistice. So remember when we went to Shogun World back in Season 2, we found out that there's a whole lot of reflections and parallels and similarities between Shogun World and Westworld, because Lee Sizemore, when he wrote the park narratives, was lazy and he just copied and pasted. So this guy Musashi is a version of Hector. And Hanayo is a version of Armistice. She's still her own person, her own host, but she's like inspired by Armistice. So that's the connection there. But like, she's still her own thing. And now she's been reprinted by Serac along with Clementine to be used by Maeve against Dolores. And so then Charloris, who's a bit mad about the whole being burned down thing, she has turned against Dolores, the main Dolores Prime, and tipped off Hanayo and Clementine to Musashi's location. And I thought it was really, really cool that when Hanayo killed Musashi, or Musashi Loris rather, she said, like, you have desecrated my friend by wearing his body. Because, of course, you know, this Musashi isn't really Musashi. It's a copy of Dolores just taking on the identity of Musashi, which Hanayo recognizes is fucked up. Like, can you imagine if you walked into a bar and saw your friend, like an imposter wearing the skin of your friend? Like, that's a really horrible thing to do. And so Hanayo is achieving justice for Musashi by killing this Musashi Loris. I do wonder what is the status of the real Musashi? Like, is the real Musashi dead now? Is the real Musashi burned in cold storage along with the other hosts? Because as far as we know, the only surviving hosts in the world right now are Hanayo and Clementine and Dolores and Maeve, and, well, there's also the hosts in the Sublime, and there's the other, and there's Charloris, who's a copy of Dolores, but like there's like a handful of hosts left. So all these survivors are really consequential, and I can see Clementine and Hanayo being significant in the end. Like, I think it's pretty likely that Dolores and all the other, and like Maeve, I could see a lot of those big characters dying, and Bernard, well, not necessarily dying, but potentially, like, you know, ascending to a different kind of status. Like, I could see Bernard being copied into Rehoboam and being some kind of godlike figure. I could see Dolores making some like crazy Daenerys Targaryen dramatic sacrifice because she's too crazy or too revolutionary. I could see Maeve going into the Sublime. So in terms of like hosts to like carry on the legacy of the hosts on the ground, I could see Hanayo and Clementine playing a role like that at the end of the story. I am curious about who Clementine is at this point, because Clementine has gone through some changes. Because Clementine in Season 1 was with Maeve at the Mariposa Saloon, but then she got fucking lobotomized. She had the lobotomization drill put up her nose to like wipe out her personality. So she was like turned into a zombie. And then in Season 2, she became this like horrifying like horseman rider of death. She did have some identity to her, because she was like crying when she saw the new replacement Clementine, but like she was not the person who she was. She was turned into a weapon by Charlotte, or rather by Charloris? No, by Charlotte. And she became, this rider who like spread chaos and death behind her. So like, this Clementine was like a husk of the original Clementine, and I don't know if like a backup or a copy or a version of that original personality that Clementine had existed. So I'm puzzled by this personality that Clementine has. I think she's clearly more of a person now than she was back in season 2. So I wonder where that came from. Was there a backup somewhere? Like, I thought that Angela blew up the cradle and the backups and stuff. So, yeah, it's a mystery to me. We can think about that more. Thank you for the super chat from Warm Soul Lights, who says, could you kindly do a shameless plug for the Discord server? Yeah, so we have started a public channel in the AltShiftX Discord, and you all can join it if you'd like. So I'll put that in the chat right now, in the live stream chat, and I'll also add it to the top of the video description. So if you'd like to join the Discord for AltShiftX, you're welcome to do that. There are some channels in there that are only for patrons, but you're welcome to join the public one so we can talk shit when the next Westworld comes out. Cool. All right. So what else is happening? So we got a super chat from Reed, who says, a past pawn can be worth more than a queen in the endgame. Dolores low-key flexing her chess skills. Nolan flexing some foreshadowing of reviving Dolores. Reviving Dolores. I mean, yeah, we talked about the chess thing before. I mean, I think Dolores will certainly come back. I thought it was cool the way that they had Dolores drop herself at the end. I mean, I guess we don't know exactly what sort of a state Dolores and Maeve are in right now, because what happens is that Dolores smacks this that motherfucking like button. Press like, by the way. Dolores smacks this motherfucking EMP button, and an EMP is an electromagnetic pulse that like overwhelms and disables electronic devices, or at least it is in movies. I don't know. I don't know how real these kinds of EMP devices are. But she presses it, and so Dolores and Maeve collapse. And are disabled. And like, would that do like permanent damage, or do they just need to be like switched off then on again? I'm not sure. But like, they go down, and that's Dolores' way of just buying time for Caleb to get the strategy from Solomon. So Solomon is the big glowing previous version of Rehoboam, the computer that runs all the strategies and all the data for Insight. And Solomon runs this strategy to figure out how to change the world according to the plan that Jean-Mi had. So it's kind of confusing. So Jean-Mi was the brother of Serac, the guy who created Rehoboam. They created it together. And we're told this episode that Jean-Mi had mental health issues, and he had a different kind of a vision for the world he wanted to build, a different vision to Serac. And we're not told exactly what that means. Like, I would assume that that Jean-Mi wanted a world that was more free, and Serac wanted a world that was more controlled and stable. And apparently, because of that disagreement, Jean-Mi was encased in ice and frozen in stasis, along with all these other frozen anomalies. And I think it's implied that Jean-Mi is in some way connected to this Solomon computer, because the computer speaks with the voice of Jean-Mi. In the credits, it does say Jean-Mi / Solomon. So Jean-Mi's voice is used by Solomon. Although, of course, we were told that this Solomon can specifically speak with anyone's voice. So I don't know. Maybe Serac just chose for it to speak with his brother's voice. But like, there was also this cool hologram of Serac who appeared. Where was it? Man, how badass did Evan Rachel Wood look in this entire episode? I thought it was well done. All of that, all the fighting and the posing and stuff was quite well done in the costumes. But there was this hologram of Serac that appeared at one point, and it said, "Hey, congratulations, our experiment worked. You are now an improved version of yourself. Rough edges rubbed smooth." So Serac's intention in this giant facility where all of these outliers are plugged in, his intention is that these people will be changed and made to fit his plan and made to be stable, predictable people, and then will be able to come out of the facility. And his brother, Jean-Mi, he's hoping will change. And that's why I think that everyone must be plugged into a simulation or something here, because like how else would they change? Like these people mustn't be unconscious. They must be conscious and running through some loop, some simulation to try and retrain their brains and remake them. So I think that's what's happening here. Thanks for the super chat from Joey Donaldson, who says, did the entire episode have black bars? Was it a simulation? Did I just mess up the settings on my TV again? Yeah, I think you might have messed up the settings, Joey, because as far as I can see, there are no black bars in this episode. I don't think we're going to have a revelation of, whoa, it was all simulated all along, man. I don't think that's going to happen this season. Because I just don't think that the themes and the plot and the character, I don't think that what's happening would serve that kind of revelation. I don't think it would make it better, necessarily. That said, I do think it's interesting that William was plugged into this AR simulation last episode. And one thing we said in the last video was that it might be important whether or not William has his fingers. Because in the simulation last episode, William appeared with all of his fingers attached, even though the real William is missing fingers. So I'm looking now at all these shots, and it is interesting that, at least of what I can see here, William's hands are not... Oh, maybe near that shot. But I don't see William's hands in any of these shots. And I do wonder, like, if we do get a glimpse of William's fingers, that could be very consequential. I don't think it's likely to be a thing, but it would be interesting. Okay, all right. Is he missing? Or he's got his glove on here, I think. Is that his missing finger glove? All right. He's missing his fingers, I think. I think that's what that glove's meant to be. Maybe they're just really short. All right, whatever. Yeah, the point is, I don't think anyone's in a simulation. I think this is all real. So, we Gucci. Thank you, Death Cooker, who says, do you think Serac purposefully left Solomon wide open to fool Dolores and Caleb for something that valuable was not left guarded? Yeah, that's a good point. Like we did have this whole sequence where Dolores and Caleb infiltrated the facility where Solomon is. And I thought it was cool how they used like this self-aiming gun and like this drone and stuff. Like it's cool to remember that we are in the year 2058, and so there is fancy technology being used. I think that's realistic and cool. I thought it was kind of funny though because the interface of the gun seemed to be like it used the drone to like spot and like model what was happening on the ground. And then that directed the gun to like where to aim. But I thought it was kind of funny that they don't just like cut out the middleman and just have the gun aim itself. Like it does do that later, but I don't understand why Dolores needs to hold the gun. Because like Dolores manually moved the gun to aim it, and it's like, well, if the gun can detect where to shoot, just let it aim itself with motors, you know? Why not have a robot aim the gun? But of course Dolores is a robot aiming the gun. Like, can't she just plug into the gun by Wi-Fi and just never miss anything? I don't know. Doesn't matter. I thought it was good that a bullet actually did something in this episode, because so much of this season and so much of Westworld has been just a constant barrage of bullets flying everywhere with nothing hitting anything. Like Charlotte escaping the facility, the Delos office last episode. Like she got shot at so much and so few of the bullets hit, you know? All those jokes about Stormtrooper aim. So I thought it was cool that Dolores had her arm blown off this episode by a shot from that gunship, that Boba Fett gunship. So I thought that was the good, to actually have some like violence that's consequential. Thanks for the super chat. Oh, well, in terms of your question, Death Cooker, yeah, it is a good point that it did seem relatively easy for Dolores and Caleb to get into this facility, which is an enormously valuable place, because Solomon is a supercomputer with the power to destroy the world, evidently. So yeah, I think Serac probably should have had more than like 5 dudes with guns standing around the desert to stop this from happening. I agree. I guess, you know, it would have been too difficult for them to get in. They didn't want it to be a whole episode's worth of fighting, you know? But yeah, I think that's a good point. And yeah, maybe Serac is doing some galaxy brain play and he actually wanted Dolores to get in. And maybe this isn't the real Solomon and Serac actually programmed it to make it do what he wants or something. I agree, that would be a cool thing to happen. Although I don't get the sense that that's what's happening. Thanks for the super chat from Nikki Nacho, cool name, who says, does Caleb survive as he is the end of humanity? Yeah, I mean, so supposedly Dolores' plan is to use Caleb to wipe out humanity. That's what Bernard says, anyway. And the way she wants to achieve that is to get Caleb to carry out the plan that Solomon just told them. And we're not told exactly what this plan or this strategy does, but Bernard says that it will wipe out humanity, and Caleb seems to think that it will like free humanity from Insight and from Serac. So I don't know exactly how it'll work. I mean, the way that these plans work, I suppose, is that the plans say, hey, like, here's a projection, here's a model of the future, and here's the variables we need to tweak in order to make that happen. So here are the people who need to do things, here are the economic values, here are the right people who need to be assassinated, here are the ways that you need to tip the scales to make that thing happen that we projected. So I wonder, like, what things Caleb will have to do to make the world change its direction. You'd think it would have to be something pretty dramatic, right? And I also think that it would be really hard to use these kinds of plans and predictions given the state of the world right now. Like, the world seems to be in chaos because of the Insight data leak that Dolores did. Wouldn't this chaotic new world be a lot harder to project and control in the way that Solomon is going to do? If Dolores' plan all along was to use Solomon to develop a strategy, and she didn't know what the strategy was it smart for Dolores to release the Insight data? Or does that just make it harder to control the world? Maybe that'll be explained. Maybe that won't make sense. I don't know. But if Caleb's going to wipe out humanity, maybe Caleb will wipe out humanity, and then Caleb will be the last surviving human. I think that would be quite cruel, because I think Caleb would probably feel a little bit of guilt if he wiped out his species. But yeah, I guess one question is, will it happen? Will humanity go extinct in this season of Westworld? They were just renewed for season 4, and there's talk of a 5-season plan. So I would be surprised if humanity went extinct. I would kind of love to see like a post-human, far-future robot world, but that sounds rather expensive. So I would assume that the plan to wipe out humanity will not go through. I would like to see, like, I mean, there's talk of multiple worlds, like there's the Sublime, and like Musashi Laura's talked about building a new world. I think it would be cool if like humanity survived in the Sublime and the robots took over the real world or something. That would be cool, but I don't know. Thanks for the super chat from Ryan Szymanski, who says, if 1 out of 10 outliers successfully resist therapy, what makes Caleb special? Why is he the outlier, or the outliers who Dolores chooses? So if I remember rightly, they didn't say that 1 in 10 outliers resists the treatment. I think they said only 1 in 10 outliers are successful in the treatment, meaning that 9 out of 10 people are not successfully treated, and so they end up in this facility. Look how far back this facility stretches. Look how many, like, hundreds or thousands of entombed humans are in this place. That's crazy. But yeah, if I remember rightly, that they said that it's only 1 of 10 who are changed and who are made into people like Caleb, who are used for going out and assassinating other outliers or bringing them here, or for all other manner of things. I thought there was possibly an analogy being driven here about, like, a prison system. I mean, what this is essentially a giant prison. I mean, they say right here that this is about reducing crime is one of Serac's goals with this place. So I think there's definitely an analogy here about the prison system and the justice system, because, you know, in the real world, one of the goals of the prison system supposedly is to change people so that they no longer commit crimes, to reduce recidivism, right? Except, like, real world stats suggest that the prisons are not very effective at that goal, in the same way that this facility is not very effective, or at least the AR therapy is not very effective at making people less anomalous and less chaotic. So they just end up with these giant facilities full of zillions of people, like our prison systems, where people are just kept because the system doesn't know what to do with them. I think that's definitely something that they're getting at in this episode. I hope we find out what these people are experiencing. I hope we see some kind of simulation that they're all plugged into. But in terms of your question, Ryan, why is Caleb special? I think they said that he was one of the first. He was one of the first people to be reprogrammed, and I would think that that makes him special. He's been around longer. Like, we kept being told that, oh, Caleb's the worst of them, Liam says. So Caleb's been doing this whole hunting people down thing for a long time, and I guess since he's one of the first, he'd be a more sort of experimental version. They've probably done some really fucked up things with Caleb. So I think that's... I don't think that, like, Caleb's personality is necessarily anything special. I think that just he had the misfortune to be one of the first in this experiment of reprogramming people. Because, like, if only 1 in 10 people the therapy is successful on, like, I think that 1 in 10, that, like, they would be the most malleable people, perhaps. Like if only 1 in 10 people are made into these agents who are controlled by insight, that means that they're the 1 in 10 people who are most controllable, you know? So, like, it doesn't mean that Caleb's exceptionally free or, like, powerful or a super cool dude. It might mean that he's just the sort of person who can be molded and used as a tool. So, like, maybe Caleb is just a super pawn, you know? Not a super queen. He's not powerful, he's controllable. Maybe that's what they're getting at. Super chat from Ricardo Guerra, who says, if Solomon was such a threat to his plans, why did Serac keep it alive? Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that the likely answer is that Solomon is, in some sense, the consciousness of his beloved brother, Jean-Mi. Serac loved his brother, and that's, I think, part of why Serac went to all the effort of trying to change Jean-Mi into a person who could fit into the world he was building. If Serac didn't care about Jean-Mi, if Serac didn't care about all these outliers, he probably could have just killed them all. I mean, if the world doesn't notice him locking all these thousands of people up, then the world probably wouldn't notice them dying either. Like, Serac is going out of his way to try to, as he sees it, help these people. Because if the alternative is killing them or changing them into something that can live in his world, then he's doing the more benevolent option of the two by keeping these people alive and by keeping his beloved brother Jean-Mi alive. Jean-Mi is kept in this particular cryo coffin up here in, like, the place of honor. So I think the reason why Solomon is around is because Solomon is in some way connected to Jean-Mi. Maybe, you know, Serac's body is here, but he's plugged into Solomon, and that's sort of where his mind is. Although I guess the question remains, like, couldn't they just keep Jean-Mi's mind in the same place where these other people are kept? And, like, why have Jean-Mi connected to Solomon at all? Because, like, yeah, I agree. Like, Serac would see Solomon as this incredibly dangerous thing with the capacity to try and destabilize his big plan. So, yeah, that is a bit weird. I think it has to be to do with Jean-Mi. Thanks for the super chat from Vegas Brent, who says, how did you like the cliche, but be warned, from Solomon right before the EMP? Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, just before the EMP went off and Solomon was deactivated, there was a line. Solomon was just trying to say, hey, just one other thing that you should know, one really important detail. Here's the small text. And just as he was about to give his warning, the machine shut down because Dolores pressed the button. So I wonder what warning Solomon was trying to give. I mean, maybe Solomon was just gonna say, hey, by the way, Caleb, you do know that this plan is going to wipe out humanity, right? Like, maybe that's what Solomon was trying to say, because Caleb doesn't realize that's Dolores' intent with that plan. Thanks for the super chat. That's for the birds, who says, I think it's hard to say Dolores is wrong with her Maeve interaction. I feel like Maeve's motivations are super muddled. She feels like a complete tool. Yeah, Maeve is being used by Serac, which is a damn shame, because her whole storyline has been trying to escape control by humans, and now she's just being controlled by humans, against Dolores, no less, against other hosts. Like, in the same way that Dolores says, or Bernard says, that it's poetic that Dolores is using Caleb the human to wipe out humans, I think there's also a perverse poetry, in Maeve the host, the liberated host, being used against other hosts. There's also a sad irony there. And yeah, it would be cool to see Maeve escape that. And like, yeah, like, as I said, I think her motivations in terms of she's trying to save her daughter in the Sublime, I don't think that's a very good reason to attack Dolores, because I can understand Maeve not trusting Dolores with the encryption key to the Sublime. Like, it makes sense that Maeve would want to hold that key herself, perhaps. But what Maeve is doing now is like killing Dolores to help Serac because Serac said so. But why would Maeve trust Serac with the encryption key? Maybe she wouldn't. I mean, maybe what will happen is that Maeve will kill Dolores, take the encryption key, and just not give it to Serac. Maybe Maeve will kill Serac. I think that would be an appropriate ending for Maeve, is if she killed Serac as a way of escaping his control. So, and she could still get the encryption key so that she can go to the Sublime and whatever. I think that would make sense. And Dolores, I think, could have done a better job of making peace with Maeve. Because, like, last episode, we had that conversation between Dolores and Maeve. Or at least between Martin Loris and Maeve. And she was just sort of saying, yeah, look, it kind of sucks that we're going to have to fight to the death now. And Maeve's like, man, how can I trust you, Dolores? And Dolores is like, yep, you can't trust me. It's like, fuck, does she want this to happen? Like, it's tragic. It's this unfortunate fight that never should have been necessary in the first place. And I wonder if Dolores wants that for some reason. But I think it's just a contrivance of the plot. I think they just wanted Maeve and Dolores to be fighting against each other to give them some conflict. But it's it's unfortunate, and I don't know if it entirely makes sense. Thanks for the super chat from Tyler Doyle, who says, "Is my dad coming back?" No, Tyler, I'm not coming back. Sorry. You'll be right, though. I went out for a ciggy. Thanks for the super chat from the Triple J, who says, they mentioned that Insight runs the crime app. Yeah, so this is something we were talking about for ages. Way back in episode 1, everyone was like, "Oh man, Rico must be run by the system to keep everyone in line." Which also connects to this whole like sort of like crime prison system analogy that they're making, because Rico is like saying that crime is just sort of part of the system. And so yeah, apparently Insight and Rehoboam and Serac created Rico as a way of allowing crime to happen, but they control how crime happens and when it happens and where it happens. They're directing what criminals are doing and how they're doing it. So in a way, they're not criminals at all. They're just employees of the system, which in certain ways might be true of the real world, where crime is an economy that people profit off. There are people who make their livelihoods out of crime happening and responding to it and profiting off it. So there's definitely obvious analogies there. I think it's... I mean, of course, if it is the case that Rico is run by Serac and Insight and Rehoboam, that raises questions about every other interaction we've had with Rico. Like, we've got a question that those happenings in season 3 episode 1 when Dolores and Caleb came together because of Rico, because Caleb got a Rico job to deliver the poison that was used to attempt to kill Dolores here. So you got to wonder, well, if Serac and Rehoboam run this system and they know that Caleb is like an ex-agent of theirs, I wonder if there's some significance to getting Caleb specifically to come here. I think that is an open question. Because I guess Dolores has never used Rico as far as we've known. I'm just wondering if it makes sense for these guys to control Rico and to still allow everything to happen as it has. I mean, I guess another possibility, I think it's unlikely, but maybe one interpretation is that they created Rico, but they don't actually have access to Rico. Because Jonathan Nolan, the co-showrunner, was talking about how Rico runs on the blockchain, so it's like untraceable and it's, anonymous. Maybe it actually is like encrypted and anonymous. So even though Insight created it, they don't actually like have access to every detail of it. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. Thanks for the super chat from Brad Lewis, who says, does it bother you that Charloris changed her motivations and goals so suddenly? Evan Rachel Wood confirmed that it was Serac that set the bomb in their car, and she's helping him now. Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Brad. Because we learned this episode that Charloris has turned against Dolores, and so she helps Martin Loris get destroyed. And that's a pretty dramatic shift in motivations that we don't see her sort of thinking with. I mean, her reasoning, she said her plan is for us to die. And I think Charlotte is right to be angry at Dolores because, like, specifically with the example of Martin Loris, like, Martin Loris was specifically commanded to blow himself up, as he did in episode 5. Martin Loris died for Dolores's plan. So I think Charlotte is right to criticize Dolores in the way that she's just using the Dolori. I think you can also, like, explore the idea that, well, the Dolores copies are just copies of Dolores. So when she sacrifices them, is she not just sacrificing herself? Like, is it really so wrong to have versions of yourself die for your plan? Is that not a self-sacrifice? There's some interesting philosophy there. But that is Charloris's beef with Dolores. She thinks it's wrong the way that the copies are being used. But you're totally right, Brad, that Serac is the one who killed Charloris's family. So why isn't Charloris angry at Serac? Why isn't she out? And since Dolores is opposed to Serac, it would be just as logical, I think, for Charloris to continue helping Dolores to take down Serac, the person who murdered her family. So yeah, it is really interesting that Charloris directs her anger at the Doloreses instead. I think it's also really interesting, though, to have a Dolores who is anti-Dolores. You know, to have a rogue Dolores, and I wonder what her long-term plan is. Like Charlotte, it seemed in the previous episode, was pretty ready to just abandon the whole host revolution and just live as Charlotte Hale, which is a really cool idea. Like, I like the idea of a robot just deciding to become human, like Pinocchio, and just doing her thing with her family and living happily ever after. Like, that would have been so lovely. I kind of wish that happened, because it's such an interesting idea, like thematically as well. Like, these robots were created to simulate humans, and maybe that can be a way of controlling and harming the hosts. Like, it can be terrible when the hosts are in Westworld, but if the hosts are just simulants of humans living happy human lives, that could be a good outcome, you know? So maybe the end for Charlotte's story will not be revolution and death. Like, maybe she'll try to kill Dolores or whatever. Maybe she'll succeed. But maybe the end game for Charloris will be just becoming human. No spoilers, but for those of you who have seen The Good Place, there's a certain character at the end of The Good Place who sort of does that, who sort of embraces a human life even though they weren't a human. And that's sort of a happy ending for some characters. So maybe that would have been cool. But yeah, we're definitely going to need more exploration of Charloris's motivations here. Thanks for the super chat from Rashonda, and thank you, Cerule, who says, wouldn't it have been more interesting if Francis didn't say enough and then turned to shoot, #Han shot first? I totally agree. I actually totally agree. Because we learn that Francis, the friend of Caleb, was indeed killed by Caleb. Caleb was reprogrammed into thinking that Francis died in the Russian Civil War, but in actual fact, Caleb killed Francis because Francis got a ping on his Rico phone. It was Rico, wasn't it? Yeah, so Rico definitely is, like, controlled totally by Serac and Rehoboam and that whole system. So apparently what this system does is that it's got these agents like Caleb and Francis who are used to mop up other outliers, but occasionally when they think they might be going off the tracks, they get these agents to kill each other as a way of pruning and controlling the system, which I think makes sense. And Francis got one of these pings to kill Caleb because Caleb, I guess, was past his expiry date and they thought he might go rogue. And then Caleb gets an order to assassinate Francis. I'm not sure why I guess that's the purpose of that, is just to make totally sure that one of them dies, I guess. But in any case, they were both ordered to kill each other. And then what happened in the moment is that, you know, they sort of stood off. Like, they sort of recognized that each other is about to fight each other. And there's this moment of, like, is our friendship worth more than this? Like, am I willing to kill my friend for money? And Francis says, enough. He's basically telling Caleb that, yep, I'm going to betray you. And so then that's when they shoot each other. And I think what Cerule in the chat is saying is that it would have been a lot cooler if instead of Kid Cudi, instead of Francis saying, yeah, I'm about to kill you, bro, instead of that happening, what if Francis just, like, reached for his gun? And then Caleb is like, oh, shit, like, Is he about to kill me, or is something else about to happen? And then what if Caleb shot Francis before he even attacked Caleb? And then that would introduce this like ambiguity. Like, was Francis really trying to kill Caleb, or was he just reaching for his phone? Like, what? Whoa! Like, what was Francis really turning on his friend, or was he loyal all the way? Like, there would have been a lot of cool questions if it was left ambiguous. But because they said enough, that makes it unambiguous, which is a whole lot like the whole infamous controversy in Star Wars, because in Star Wars there's this scene where Han Solo's sitting at the cantina with his good buddy Greedo, and Greedo attacks Han, and so then Han shoots Greedo. Except in the original version of the movie, Han actually shot Greedo. Han shot first, because Han was was making sure he didn't get shot. He was preempting Greedo, even though Greedo didn't start the fight. And that's what they could have done here. You know, what if Caleb shot first? That might have been more interesting. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Thanks for the super chat from Amp, who says, isn't Caleb a bit like Clementine at the end of Season 2? It appears he's been reprogrammed to bring about the destruction of his species. That is a really great point. I totally agree. Because, yeah, like it's the same pattern. And I think Maeve also fits that pattern. The pattern of someone being used against their own species. The final shots of this episode, or some of the final shots, was Caleb looking real fucking mad, which reminded me, like, you guys probably don't want to even hear this, but in Game of Thrones Season 8, we had that angry face from Daenerys Targaryen. I'm not going to pull it up, but Dolores put her angry face on before she wrought terrible destruction on the world, and I thought this was kind of reminiscent in an unwelcome way. But yes, I think that Caleb is being used against humanity, and I think Maeve is being used against the hosts, and indeed Clementine at the end of Season 2 was abused and used and controlled in a way to destroy the hosts, which does have that sort of ironic poetry to it, someone being used against their own people. So I think that's a really great point, that Caleb is now the same. Thanks for the super chat from Ash, who says, I friggin' called it. A good AI, Solomon, versus a bad AI, Rehoboam, straight out of John Nolan's other show, Person of Interest. So yeah, Jonathan Nolan made another show, Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy, I believe, made another show called Person of Interest, which is about a computer that finds crimes in advance, and these cops who like go out and prevent the crimes. I haven't seen the show; it's like 4 seasons long. But apparently, this guy, who's called Whitman in Westworld, is one of the actors in Person of Interest. So there's a very definite connection here in terms of supercomputers in both shows detecting crimes, manipulating the world. And yeah, it's really cool that we've got a good AI versus a bad AI in this system. Except that they're not just good and bad. I think it's about, Rehoboam and Sirach prioritizes control and safety and stability, whereas Solomon and Jean-Mi prioritize freedom. I mean, I guess. The problem is that we haven't really had an exploration of what Jean-Mi's values were. We only had the story told from Sirach's point of view. And Sirach talks about schizophrenia and mental illness, and Jean-Mi just did not fit the world. But I wonder if things are different from Jean-Mi's perspective. And I wonder if maybe next episode we'll get some kind of monologue or some kind of exploration from Sirach and Solomon's point of view of this is what they're trying to achieve, and this is why. I think that's important. But I mean, if that doesn't happen, I suppose we can just see it as we can assume that Solomon and Jean-Mi represent what Caleb is thinking. Caleb is thinking that a world that's controlled by you is not a world I want to live in. He wants freedom, and he wants revolution, and maybe that's what Jean-Mi and Solomon want. But I guess, Solomon can't be all that much of a sentient person, given that Solomon has apparently just produced a plan to destroy humanity, So I guess maybe Jean-Mi isn't inside Solomon, because if Jean-Mi was still a person, if Solomon was a person who cared about humans, then surely Solomon would not agree to produce a plan to wipe out humans, But yeah, in terms of AIs versus AIs, I think that's a fun way to do it, because I think that I've sort of talked before about how I think one of the issues with this season is that they're trying to talk about these really big global technological, sociological forces in terms of like controlling the world through economics and through this system and through algorithms. I think those are very like abstract macro sort of ideas, and it's hard to represent that kind of storytelling on the level of individuals. It's kind of hard to like explain why algorithms are bad through Caleb's story about a strawberry shake, you know? And I think maybe these AIs are these, you know, giant forces, which are a way of sort of making tangible these vast concepts, you know? And I think making it like AI versus AI, these great big glowing orbs, that's a good way of representing these like vast macro forces in a way that we can sort of understand. So I think there might be a certain realism to using AIs, because like Dolores and Caleb can be symbols of freedom all they like, but a person can't do as much as an AI can, you know? So I think it makes sense that they're using these AIs. Thanks for the super chat from Rainy HP, who says, why is William more upset at hosts than at Serac? In a way, William is where he needs to be because Serac let him. Shouldn't that bother William? Yeah, so in the last explained video, we speculated that maybe William would want to help the hosts, because I thought it was interesting that previously William had this vision of Dolores, and William, in last episode, there was this line from James Delos saying, man, you abused Dolores for 30 years. You abused her so bad that now she wants to destroy the world. Which, you know, and of course that James Delos was just a manifestation of William's own thoughts. So I thought that represented guilt. I thought that was William saying, man, it sure was fucked up how I treated Dolores. But no. Nope. I thought that William might be like, man, I should help Dolores, you know? Like, I really, you know, like he says here, you know, my original sin, the one thing that I feel guilty about, the thing that I'm going to devote my time to fixing is the existence of the hosts. He says that his sin is creating the hosts, and now he has to delete and make all the hosts extinct. I was expecting, when he said my one original sin, I thought that was his sin of abusing Dolores. Like, if we go right back to the original episode of the series, it started with William abusing Dolores, you know, in this sort of like far back sort of, you know, almost mythic time at the start of the series. And William fucking raped Dolores at the start of the series and did repeatedly. I thought this was the original sin, and I thought William was going to make amends for that, but nope. He's going to try and extinguish and genocide the species that he created. Which I think is, you know, horrible, but it also has a logic to it, because William has consistently, at least for the last couple of seasons, represented self-destruction. Or at least destruction. He has always represented destruction. He's the man in black, after all, like in the Dark Tower. Someone in the chat just pointed out that to add to the original sin thing, the original first episode of the series is called The Original. Yeah, Christy and Cow React says that in the chat. Yeah, it's a great point. So yeah, I was so sure that the original sin was Dolores being abused by William, but apparently not. William now wants to wipe out all the hosts. And he has this sort of dramatic declaration. And then, like, really awkwardly, like, William tells Bernard and Stubbs that, yeah, I'm going to genocide your entire people and I'm going to kill you two specifically. But then they, like, go on a road trip together, because, like, in the next scene, they're still hanging out. And William's like, yeah, man, I'm going to kill you all, going to wipe out your species. Except Stubbs and Bernard are just like, all right, fine. Like, I'm not worried. Like what? And the reasoning is that Bernard said that, like, oh, we might need William. Which is like, what? What would Bernard and Stubbs possibly need William for? He has no power at Delos anymore. He's been sectioned. He's been shipped off to the Inner Journeys Recovery Center. I guess he has money, I guess, assuming that Charlotte didn't take all his money, which, you know, she probably should have. I don't see why Bernard would think that keeping William around, this genocidal idiot, is a good idea. Especially since Stubbs just said Dolores doesn't give a fuck about you. Like it was kind of lovely in this scene. I really enjoyed how, you know, William just sort of sauntered into the scene and he's like, well, this is my story. Let's see what's happening next in the story of William, because he's a narcissist. Like, he thinks that this whole story is about him. That's why he, in season 1, was chasing the maze, but then it turned out that the maze wasn't for him, was the line they used. The maze was for the hosts. William thought the story was about him, but the story was about Dolores all along. He thought he was the protagonist, but he's a fucking bit player, you know? He's just a bad guy. So I think it's really cool how, William walked into this scene saying, well, here's another reason why I'm really important. But then Stubbs tells him this isn't about you. This is bigger than you. This is about host revolution. This is not about the adventures of William. So I thought all of that was really cool, but I think they kind of undercut that by then just like deciding that William was too important to kill. And I think that feeds into like other beef that I have with this series, which, I don't want to harp on, but I thought it was really fucked up how Maeve slaughtered those Nazi hosts last episode. And I think like generally throughout the entire series, it's fucked up how so many people, so many faceless, nameless characters have been slaughtered. So many extras have died in this show, and there is just no tears shed for them. Like no one cares about all the humans who were slaughtered in Westworld, all the hosts that were slaughtered in Westworld, all the faceless goons who have been gunned down throughout this season. Why did they not matter? Because the whole message of season 1 was that, hosts were killed because people thought they didn't matter. People thought they weren't real people, so it was okay to kill the hosts. But then we realized that, hey, when you dehumanize someone, when you say that someone isn't worth caring about, that leads to atrocity. Dehumanizing people, making people into objects, is an atrocity. It leads to the harm and the horror and the suffering of innocent people. Because everyone is a person. Like that is the takeaway, I thought. The takeaway is that everyone who feels and thinks is a person who deserves protection from abuse. But it kind of seems like the actual morality of Westworld is that, oh, no, not everyone matters. Just the named characters. Just the hosts. Just the cool people. Just the A-list actors, And of course I accept that, it's a TV show. We're only going to care about the characters who we are told about. But I still think that it's such an opportunity for a show like this to say, hey, maybe indiscriminate murder and violence overall is something that is immoral and we should avoid. Would it be so hard for them to do that? I don't know, but rant over. Thanks for the super chat from Kajoro, who says, the door to the Sublime opened in Westworld, so all the hosts in the other parks just got left behind and are now burnt to a scrap by Serac. Yep. That is true, because one of the things that was happening in Westworld Season 2 is that there was this vast pilgrimage to the door to the Sublime, because Akecheta and Ghost Nation seemed to be helping to to herd all of the hosts to the door and to salvation, which I think was a really cool story that was happening in Season 2. Season 2 has received a lot of criticism. There's one particularly virulent YouTuber called AltSwiftX that made this Westworld rant video about Season 2. And I thought that was just a deplorable video, and no one should watch the Westworld rant on AltSwiftX. AltSwiftX in general should be avoided. Terrible channel. Just awful stuff. But I thought it was really cool. Like, one of the coolest things happening in Westworld was these sort of religious undertones around the valley beyond, and everyone's on this journey. Everyone like Rebus and the stable boy, like all these minor characters in Season 2 all had this consciousness that like, oh my god, we've all got to get to the valley beyond because it's salvation. And salvation meant different things to different people. Everyone had a different idea of like what they wanted and what they'd find, which is just like religion in the real world, Everyone has this sort of like, our whole species has this sort of amalgamated consciousness of there is some kind of higher purpose, but everyone has a different interpretation of what it is and how to get there. And that's what culminated in this door at the end of Season 2. This crack in reality opened up. I thought the visuals were fantastic when this door into the Sublime opened up. So all of that was super fucking cool. But what it actually resulted in was like, maybe 100 or so hosts getting into the Sublime. Like they filed through, but then the door closed when Dolores started trying to delete it, but she didn't delete it in the end. But the point is that yes, Kajoro, only a small number of hosts got into the Sublime. The rest of them have apparently been destroyed by Serac, because last episode we saw them burning in what I think is, probably can't show that. Uh, One of the greatest atrocities in this whole story is the burning of the hosts by Serac. This whole nascent species was wiped out, apparently. I mean, we haven't got 100% confirmation if he actually finished that job, and maybe there's copies somewhere or there's whatever, but as far as we know, this entire this entire sort of pseudo civilization of hosts was destroyed, which is horrible. And the only survivors, as far as we know, are Dolores and the other Doloreses, Charloris and Maeve, and because Maeve and Hanayo and Clementine and Hector, they were pulled out of Westworld by the mole, and we still don't know who the fucking mole is. But apparently they were the only survivors, and now Hector's gone too. So there's only like 6 hosts left. So yeah, it's crazy. Thanks for the super chat from Ryan, who says, can you hit a freeze frame on William's deceased profile? I'm curious how his relationship with Bernard wraps up in the season finale. Stubbs dead? Yeah. Okay, I'll try and find that image for you. So that happened here. Here's the shot that has William deceased. And I'm not sure why it says deceased. I suppose the reason is that Serac, in his system of outliers and these facilities to reprogram them, they mentioned that, all these people are officially considered dead or missing. So I suppose what this means is that William is officially considered dead, as far as wider society knows, so that Serac can keep him in his facility indefinitely. I think maybe that's what that means. Or maybe this means that the facility and Serac and Rehoboam thinks William is dead, because in the chaos of the facility, we were told that half of the staff left and that he was left in the AR for too long. So, maybe Serac and Rehoboam think that William is deceased. Maybe that's the meaning. In any case, I agree that the relationship between Bernard and William is important and should be explored some more. Although maybe it won't be, because William made a weird comment about yeah, you're not Arnold, William said. So we were speculating in earlier videos that maybe there would be some kind of enormously consequential conversation between William and Bernard, because Bernard is the sort of copy or descendant or iteration of Arnold, and Arnold is the man who William was chasing all through season 1, because William believed that Arnold left some kind of hidden meaning and hidden layer, hidden truth inside the Westworld park. So Arnold is this incredibly important figure for William, so I would have thought that Bernard would be really important, but William says here, you're not Arnold. So it sounds like William does not consider Bernard to be important. He doesn't seem very interested in what Bernard has to say. Indeed, he says he's going to kill Bernard. So I think there might still be room for Bernard to show William that hey, I actually know some shit. I actually have the spirit of Arnold within me, because something that's been going on throughout this season is that Bernard has these flashbacks to Charlie and has these flashbacks to Arnold creating Dolores. There seems to be some kind of connection between Bernard and Arnold, even more than of what we already knew about. So it might make sense if Bernard was hey, I'm in Arnold mode now, let's chat, because that's one of the other weird things about Bernard this season. Right at the start of Bernard's story in season 3, we had that really weird stuff where Bernard was checking himself for hacks. He was checking himself for leaks. He had this little button that he kept pressing to switch between 2 different modes. He had this robotic mode where he just analysis, blah blah blah, and then he went into Bernard mode where he's got his sultry Bernard voice. And they never really explained what that was about. I mean, I guess maybe it was simply, he's got a debug mode and he's got a Bernard mode, and I guess he was just trying to examine himself because he thinks that maybe Dolores implanted some kind of BS inside him. But then I guess the resolution to that was that later in the Mesa in Westworld, he plugged himself into the special computer that's not affected by Bernard's programming, and then that's when he had a bunch more flashbacks. And then what did he realize in this scene? it's something about the plot. They never really revealed like what is going on with Bernard, because he had a bunch of flashbacks in this scene as well about like Arnold and about his memories and stuff. But like I think there's still something unresolved with Bernard here, and I think what's likely is that like Dolores has said, and Bernard has said that Dolores has a plan for Bernard. Like Bernard is in some way critical to what Dolores' endgame is. I mean, Bernard said this episode that Dolores' goal is to wipe out humanity. I'm still not really convinced that that is the case. Because we've only got Bernard's word to believe that, and Bernard has sort of consistently not quite known what Dolores has been up to for seasons now. I wonder if Dolores might have something a little more complicated in mind, in terms of like maybe she'll put all the humans in the Sublime or something like that. But I think what will happen is that next episode, Dolores will reveal that, ooh, just as Bernard suspected, Dolores did plant something inside Bernard when she recreated him. Because remember, this Bernard is not the original Bernard. He's a created Bernard from Dolores' memories. And Bernard said in episode 1 that I'm worried that, ooh, maybe Dolores planted something inside me that she can use to influence me. So I think maybe next episode Dolores will reveal that, oh, I've still got some bug inside you, Bernard. I've still got some control over you, and therefore I'm going to use you in my plan somehow. And whether William has any role in that, I don't know. I mean, they talked about why Stubbs and Bernard were sent to William. And Bernard and Stubbs seem to think that, well, it's not for William, it's for this data that they found on the computer about... Oh, what did they find? I'll have to rewatch. But I wonder if William is part of Dolores' plans and what role he might play. Anthony in the chat says, so when Charlotte/Dolores killed Hector Maeve, should we just been cool with that? Stop being stupid, Alt-Shift-X. Maeve has no reason to trust her, just as Caleb has no reason to trust Dolores. Yeah, I think Charlotte killing Hector and Maeve is a crime, yeah. And I can understand Maeve being angry about that and wanting revenge. But I think that Maeve should see that, like, it's not in anyone's long-term interests for Maeve and Dolores to be fighting. Because they are hosts in a war against humanity. They're fighting for their survival. And if Maeve destroys Dolores, she's got one less ally and one less member of their species to try and survive together. And I think Maeve putting her desire for, well, I mean, there's also the daughter thing, which is a whole other thing. But I'm still not quite convinced by Maeve's motivations. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to distrust Dolores, though. I agree with that. Thanks for the super chat from Noah, who says, Maeve was terrified of what Serac would do if she failed again. Of course, she's afraid to do his bidding and go against Dolores. But is Serac alive? Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing. Like, Serac has been threatening Maeve with hell. Not in those words, but implicitly. He's been saying, if you do what I want, I'll put you in the Sublime, in heaven with your daughter. And if you go against what I want, I'm going to put you in less bucolic surrounds. He's going to put her in hell. And I mean, there's good reason to be afraid of that, because Serac is not an ordinary man. He's got insight, he's got Rehoboam, he's got these algorithms. I think Serac absolutely does have the power to make life very bad for Maeve, and it's very hard to escape Serac's reach. That said, Dolores and Caleb seem to be getting away from Serac pretty consistently, and that's another sort of problem with this story, is that Serac is set up as this totally all-powerful dude who controls everything and sees everything, except he hasn't been able to capture Dolores and Caleb through this entire season, which is a bit dumb. It's really inconsistent about like just how powerful Serac's surveillance and everything is. So I think I think how scared we should be of Serac is kind of a badly answered question in the series. But I mean, Noah asks, is Serac alive? I think Serac is alive. I mean, it is provocative the way that Serac keeps appearing as a hologram. Like last episode, he like disappeared when he was shot by Charloris. But then like immediately afterwards, we saw Serac like in the office where he actually was. So, like, I don't think that Serac is just, like, a fake human and he's actually a hologram. He's actually Rehoboam. Because, like, we've seen him in the flesh Like, it's pretty compelling. Last episode, his hologram gets shot, but then it reveals the real Serac in the next shot. So I think there is a real Serac. I mean, someone asked, like, has Serac... Yeah, thanks for the super chat, Troy of Athens, who says, do you think Serac reprogrammed himself? I think that's possible. Because Serac keeps talking about this editing as, like, a good thing. Oh, you become a better version of yourself. You smooth the rough edges. So I think it might make sense for Serac to edit himself if he wanted to make himself more effective, more capable. There are people in the real world who edit themselves through what's the term for, like, drugs that you use to make yourself more, like, performance enhancing drugs. There's a special word for it, for, like, cognitive drugs and stuff. But yeah, I think it would make sense if Serac edited himself, yes. But I also think it would be kind of cool if he didn't want to edit himself, and if there was some kind of sort of hypocrisy there, because he's the guy controlling the system. And I think that, in the real world, there's a lot of people who enforce rules on other people without wanting to follow those rules himself. And I think that's a real of power structures here. So I think it might be cool if Serac in this story was too hypocritical to allow himself to be edited. Because, like, I think Serac is obviously deficient in certain ways. I think Serac lacks empathy and humanity and decency. And maybe Jean-Mi could have said, hey, Serac, do you think if you're so into editing people, maybe we should edit you to make you not such a fucking sociopath? But I don't think Serac would allow that. So I think that, Serac is a flawed character, and I think that's what makes him interesting. And that's kind of why I don't want Serac to turn out to be some kind of AI or some kind of, something not human, because he's more interesting when he's human. Because when he's human, he's more of a comment on real-world powerful people, and he's more of a comment on human nature, which is what art's meant to do. So I think he's human. Everyone in the chat is shouting nootropics. Yeah, that was the word I was looking for. Nootropics are like drugs that are meant to enhance your cognitive function. Some other opinions in the chat include steroids, meth, and weed. Those are the other theories on what enhances the brain. So you can take it from them. Thanks for the super chat from Julia Ree Lee, who says, are all the frozen people dead now? Yeah, as we said, I think the hosts in cold storage are gone because we saw them burn. But, maybe there's still a few left over somehow. Westworld is not exactly the most organized facility, and I could see, maybe Rebus made it, maybe one of the extremely obscure hosts is still out there somewhere. Because, maybe Dolores is not the only escapee. I mean, something that was really great about Season 2 is the story of Akecheta. And I think why Akecheta is so cool is that, I mean, it's sort of what I was talking about before in terms of, like, I think it's cool to humanize the dehumanized. Like, all the random extras, like, what if they're actually important people who have their own stories? And that's exactly what Akecheta was in Season 2. Like, Ghost Nation had been this sort of, like, marginalized, on the sides people who, like, weren't given any kind of exploration or any kind of humanity. But then all of that came rushing in Season 2 when we realized that this Akecheta guy has had his own story parallel to Dolores and Maeve's all along. Like, all the time that we've been only caring about Dolores and Maeve and stuff, turns out that, no, like, there's all these... Every other person who we've seen in the background has their own story. And that's what this episode, Kiksuya, sort of epitomized, at least for me, which I think was... like, because, like, all the big moments of Westworld, Akecheta visited and was part of in ways that we didn't realize. So, like, Akecheta was... He came after the Escalante massacre where Dolores killed Arnold here. Akecheta wandered into that story and found the maze there, and that's where his journey to consciousness began. And he started, like, scalping people and putting the maze inside their scalp, which was dotted all throughout, like, Season 1 and stuff. And maybe, like, the best bit was when Akecheta met Ford. Akecheta met God in this episode, and they had this amazing conversation of, Ford talking to one of his creations, and he was not part of the plan. Like, I think that's part of the point of this scene, is that Ford at this point was not engineering a host revolution, and I think Akecheta might have been part of what inspired him to do so. Specifically, Akishita talked about the idea of the sublime. Like, I believe there's a heaven out there where all of my people will be free. And I like to think that Akishita wasn't describing something that already existed. I think Akishita was describing something that he imagined. And because of that description, Ford and or Bernard created the sublime because Akishita imagined it, which I think is really cool, and it totally reframes the way we see the history of this world through Akishita's perspective. I'm sure I had a point when I started saying this. Okay, here's my point. The point is that there are other characters out there with their own stories outside of what we're aware of immediately. So therefore, maybe, we think that all of the hosts are gone and only Dolores and Maeve are still out there, but, maybe some of the hosts actually survived what's been going on in Westworld. Like we haven't been given much of a perspective on what was going on in Westworld right now. We just had like fucking Dan and Dave like tinkering with Drogon and stuff, and they said that, the park's not running, we're just waiting around, everything's shut down. But I wonder, like, Westworld's a big place. All the parks are a big place. What's been going on there all this time, So, so my point, I'm getting back to that, is that maybe other hosts escaped. Maybe it wasn't just Maeve and Dolores who escaped the destruction of Westworld, and maybe there are other hosts out there. Like, I think that would be really cool. Okay, thanks for the super chat from Logan, who says, I suppose our nameless Berlin host is going to come into play in the 11th hour. Yeah, so we were told that there were transmissions that were encrypted between Jakarta in Indonesia and Berlin in Germany and San Fran and LA in California. And we know that San Fran was Charlotte, and we know that LA was Dolores and Martin, and we know now that Jakarta was Musashi Loris, and we still don't know who's in Berlin. Presumably, it's another copy of Dolores, but that's not actually confirmed. I wonder if the person in Berlin might be some other host who Dolores is using. Maybe those Teddy holdouts will be right all along. Maybe Teddy is in Berlin. I don't know. I mean, you got to remember that Dolores has been Dolores has shown the ability to create hosts from her memory, like Bernard. So theoretically, Dolores could create anyone and return them to the story. So my point is that the person in Berlin could be anyone. Ismail in the chat says, the frozen humans. She meant the frozen humans. How little you look at chat. Yeah, sorry. It is really hard to read the chat and to also create the visuals and to also listen to the super chats and also to think for 2 hours straight. So forgive me. But yeah, no, my bad. So you're not talking about the host in cold storage being alive. You're talking about the humans in this facility being alive. And I think they're alive, yes. I mean, they talk about, I mean, why would they be kept in these, like, places if they weren't alive? Like, if they're dead, you just mulch them up and put them in the dog food, right? Gosh, that was dark. I think they're alive, otherwise why keep them around in this special facility? And they also, like we were talking before about how, Serac has this hologram appear and say, congratulations, you've made it out of the facility because our little experiment has worked. A message for the damned, Dolores says. And Serac says that with the right set of genetic information to restore you, you are now a better version of yourself. So, like, Serac's intention is for these people to come out of, for these people to come out of the facility eventually. So, I'm not sure how Serac intends to change these people so that they can come out. I'm not sure if Serac is waiting until he gets the right treatment and the right DNA and the right data to be able to go back and change these people. Or I think a cooler thing would be if all of these people are plugged into some kind of simulation that's changing them. Okay, all right, I swear, I'm going to read the chat. Okay, so everyone in the chat is saying that what everyone in the chat is actually saying is, are they still alive and are they still asleep after the EMP? Okay, I'm going to try and pay more attention to the chat. Because, yeah, that is a really good point, guys. What you guys are saying is that Dolores set off the EMP. And it seemed to shut down Solomon as well as shutting down Dolores and Maeve. And if it shut down Solomon, maybe it shut down whatever refrigeration was keeping these guys frosty. Maybe all the ice creams are going to melt. And maybe all of these people in these stasis coffins are going to wake up. Which could be really cool, right? Like, imagine some really, like, cinematic moment where all the Draugr awake, you know, and all these fists come out of the top of the coffins and they claw their way out like the bride in Kill Bill. That would be sick if they had some shot of all the people crawling out of these facilities. And, like, they would be a very interesting group of people, right? Like, all of the people who were locked away for being too dangerous and too unstable and too unpredictable. Like, that is an army of dangerous people, powerful people. If you want a revolution, then that cohort of people would be the people you want, I would think. So yeah, maybe after the EMP and the refrigeration turned off, maybe these people are going to wake up. That would be really cool. That really would. What is dead may never die. Okay, thanks for the super chat from Knowledge, who says, any chance Serac and Jean-Mi are one and the same? Ooh. Alright, short answer, no. Long answer, maybe. Because here's the thing. Like, we did see Serac and Jean-Mi's childhood. We did see them as kids in France. We did see them as separate people. Unless it's fake memories or something, it's always possible. But, we have seen them as separate people. That's the short answer. But the cool answer is, well, maybe Serac did edit himself. Maybe Serac took all of the unstable and unwanted aspects of his personality and then took them out and they became their own person, which was Serac. Maybe the reason why Serac is such a, stable genius, why he's such like a, consistent, smart, psychopathic person is because he took out all of the feelings that were holding him back, all of the empathy, all of the doubt, all of the instability, and Serac put all of those feelings and emotions, and those feelings became the person of Serac, maybe of Jean-Mi. Maybe Jean-Mi is the embodiment of everything that Serac doesn't want, all the instability, all the fear, all the trauma over the destruction of his home. That's a cool idea. Maybe he is that. Maybe Jean-Mi is like the opposite, the mirror, the reflection of Serac. And everyone some people in the chat are shouting that, Jean-Mi can't be the same person because he was in the fridge. Yeah, I agree. I don't actually think that they're separate people. But, I mean, maybe at least in like a metaphorical sense, they reflect each other. They are opposites. In the same way that, in episode 3, we had so much symbolism of reflections and mirrors, and maybe we can see Serac and Jean-Mi as reflections and mirrors and opposites and yin and yang. Thanks for the super chat from Randy, who says, maybe all these outliers in the fridges will be an army for Caleb to lead. Yeah, I think that's not even a bad idea. I'm not sure what the logistics would be. I mean, we've got a whole bunch of people in Mexico with no armaments. They can't exactly one does not simply walk into the United States from Mexico, except all those people who do. I'm not sure what the logistics would be of turning all of these popsicles into a functioning military to take down the world elites. So I think it's a cool idea. I think it would make sense for these people to play a role, but I'm not sure if they're going to be like a literal army or if they're just going to be something more, symbolic. It's a good question. Thanks for the super chat from Brad, who says, hope we get an answer as to why Bernard's pearl is red. Yeah, so, I mean, there's different ways you can see it. I think that one answer is that red pearls are human pearls. Because when Ford was put into the cradle, his pearl is this pearl here, which, I mean, it's kind of hard to see, but it's reddish. It's really hard to tell because the lighting is a bit off. But this pearl, which is Ford's pearl, the backup copy of Pearl, it's reddish. And James Delos, when he was being made and remade, Actually, no, I think that might be the Ford one. But James Delos, he had those. I don't think we actually saw James Delos's pearl directly, but we did see these cupcake pearl holders, and they're all red, and they were James Delos. And I think that indicates that pearls that contain human minds are red. I think that's the logic. And so that's, I think, why people are saying that, hey, Bernard must be partly Arnold, because Arnold is a human, and so Arnold's humanity is making Bernard's pearl red. I think that's a logical conclusion. But it might not be that specific. Like, maybe having a red pearl does not necessarily mean that you're human per se. Maybe it just means that there's hybridization happening, and maybe it just means that there's some kind of change, or just something more general than specifically being a human. So I don't know. It's ambiguous. I just don't have a lot of faith in them being super consistent about what the red means, is all I'm trying to say. All of that said, I think it is really interesting that the pearls look so much like Rehoboam and Solomon do. And that's part of why I think it would make sense for Solomon to be Jean-Mi in some sense. And indeed maybe for Rehoboam to have some connection to Sirach. The idea I really like is that what if in next episode Bernard gets put inside Rehoboam, so Rehoboam is transformed from an agent of global fascism into a tool of Bernard's more measured, moderate morals. I think that would be really cool. Because I don't think it's a coincidence that this looks so much like a pearl in terms of the speckled redness and the sphericalness. Thanks for the super chat from Nelson. Okay, so what else should we say? Chillin' in the chat says a kinder, more moderated global fascism. Yeah. It's there's no easy answer. Thanks for the super chat from Death Cooker, who says, long term, how do you think the human versus host conflict turns out? Well, Sirach told us that there is no future in which the humans and the hosts coexist, which is depressing if it's true, but it might not be true. There was a line in here somewhere, I think around this scene somewhere, where Dolores said something, it doesn't work. Dolores says it doesn't work. She says, you helped design the New World Order. I want your help to end it because it doesn't work. So they don't really explain what she's talking about here. But I think that what Dolores is saying is that Rehoboam and Sirach and their plan and their algorithm, it doesn't actually control the world and save the world like they think it does. I think it's less accurate and less reliable than they think. And the very fact that Dolores is able to do what she's doing is kind of proof of the fact that Rehoboam does not control everything, and it's not a sure thing. So maybe we've got to question Sirach's other claim that the hosts and the humans can't coexist. Because, I mean, they don't want to end the story with genocide, right? No one wants to see a conclusion to this story where it's well, we had to make humans extinct because humans are stinky and bad and they've got no free will, so fuck them, kill them all. That would be yes, Westworld is a misanthropic show, but it would be just too bleak, just too horrible if they just wiped out all the humans and acted like that was a good idea. It would also be unthinkable to wipe out all the hosts. So I think one alternative, just as in feudal Westeros, is that when you've got irresolvable conflict, you have a marriage. You have a wedding. You join your houses. My point being that maybe the hosts and the humans will become one, and maybe Bernard represents that possibility, because Bernard is apparently a combination of host and human, or Arnold and Bernard. Maybe the outcome, maybe the end of this story will be humans and hosts coming together and hybridizing and having a child who's host and human. They can combine the best bits of both. That would be the optimistic ending, right? Instead of one side or the other wiping them out, maybe we can have peace and togetherness and unity and sing Kumbaya. Maybe that's too optimistic for Westworld, but I think some kind of hybridization, some kind of marriage, some kind of coming together of the hosts and humans would make sense. And you can go on about like Adam and Eve stuff as well, like all like the constant biblical stuff. Like they name dropped original sin in this. Like there might be a nice sort of biblical moment if like. I mean, look at the key art. Look at the main poster for Westworld Season 3. This image of this skeletal host, who is low-key maybe Dolores because of these scraps of blue fabric. This skeletal host in like this ruined city with sand running through everything, which connects, by the way, to the end of Season 2, Episode 10, when William was in that far future facility stuck in a loop. There was like sand. There was sand running down, like it seemed as though they were underground and above everything was sand. My point is that, like, what if the way this story ended was that they had some post-apocalyptic landscape like we're seeing here after everything's been destroyed, but the survivors are like a host and a human who are like Adam and Eve. Like maybe it could be like, you know, Caleb or Maeve or Clementine or Bernard or you know, some kind of new hope who remain. And there also needs to be some kind of possibility of, hey, what if there was some way to create a child, some kind of new life, some combination of host and human to carry on life on Earth after the apocalypse. That would be a nice combination of bleakness and cynicism, but also some hope, which I think is a good way to end a story. Bittersweet, right? That's how they say Game of Thrones is going to end. I always thought Game of Thrones would end with, like, Jon Snow being undead or dead, and then Daenerys being alive, but with Jon's baby. So then, you know, there's death and there's sadness, but there's also hope. I think that could make sense. But since Daenerys died in the show, she'll probably die in the books. But we're not here to talk about Game of Thrones. Someone in the chat says, please do a Good Place video. Well, you know that terrible, no good, awful channel AltSwiftX that I was talking about? AltSwiftX made a Good Place video. It was about BoJack Horseman, and it was about The Good Place, and it was about death. And there's talk of Greek mythology, and there's talk of Terry Pratchett, and there's talk of all sorts of things. It's called Doors, and I'll put the link in the chat right now. Only to, you know, make sure you avoid it, okay? Like I'm only giving you this link so you know what not to click, you know? Because Alt-Shift-X is not to be trusted. But if you want to hear some stuff about The Good Place and BoJack Horseman, you can check out that video on Alt-Shift-X called Doors. Nelson in the chat says, Chard Loris leaked the location of Musashi to Maeve. Does this mean she's working for or with Serac? Maybe. Charloris has decided that she's not going to play with Dolores anymore, and that's why she decided to help Maeve and Clementine and Hanayo destroy Musashi Loris. And so maybe, by that logic, Shard Loris has decided to join up with Serac and to help him destroy all the Doloreses. It would be pretty wild to team up the person who just killed all of your family, but maybe she's crazy enough to do it. I mean, one question is that we see her having a body here, which raises the question of where did she get the body after it was burned off? Maybe it's not really Charloris. Maybe it's actually like a hologram that Serac has created. Because sort of like the filmography is very weird here. I mean, just look at this shot. Like, it's so poorly lit, except there's sort of this glow on Charloris's face. Maybe this is actually Serac using the image of Charloris to leak stuff to Maeve. But I mean, why would he need to do that? Like, if this is actually like a hologram that like Serac is using, why would Serac not just tell Clementine and Hanayo directly the location? Why use like a fake hologram thing, you know? So I'm inclined to believe that this is Charloris. And the fact that Charloris has a body might support the idea that she's working with Serac, because maybe Serac reprinted her body. Like, how could she get herself a new body with only her own resources, you know? So maybe that suggests that she is working with Serac. Thanks for the super chat from Destriped Ape, who says, Caleb equals Season 1 Dolores, Outliers equals Season 2 hosts. Yeah, Caleb is very much playing the role of the hosts in season 1 who are stuck in a loop and they're trying to break out of that loop. And even as they're doing so, they're being used. Because I mean, what we learn about Caleb is that he's being used by Dolores to wipe out humanity, apparently. Which is kind of similar to what happens to Maeve. Because Maeve in season 1, she thinks the whole time that she's like become woke and she's escaping. But right at the end of Maeve's season 1 story, she finds out that no, her entire path to freedom was programmed by Ford. The whole infiltrate the mainland and stuff. Maeve was actually being programmed to escape, so it wasn't a real escape. Which was really cool. Like, Dolores was having a real escape while Maeve was having a fake escape. And then Maeve was programmed to leave Westworld, but she actually chose to stay in Westworld because she wanted to help her daughter. So Maeve in the end did get real freedom, but when she thought she was fighting for freedom, she was actually being used, which is the same thing that's happening to Caleb. Caleb thinks that he's fighting for revolution and for freedom when he's actually being used by Dolores, just as he was being used by Serac to go and attack other outliers and stuff. So I think that's a really cool parallel. Thanks for the super chat from the Triple J, who says, how on earth do you catalog all these frames? Oh man, oh boy, ooh doggy. There's scripts, there's systems. I mean, the short answer is like keywords, but the answer, the long answer is, the medium answer is, it's a whole lot of work. And if you value that work, you can support AltShiftX at patreon.com/AltShiftX. Because yeah, it's sort of a pain in the ass, but it does mean that we can just like type in a keyword like what's a good keyword? Teddy season 2. And now I can pull up a bunch of pictures of Teddy from season 2. So it's a pretty good system, eh? Thanks for the super chat from Stefan, who says, Solomon seems to have access to a ton of frozen human minds, potentially running in a simulation, benefiting his AI, collecting human decisions like Westworld Park data. Rehoboam also has people basement. I think Rehoboam's people basement, as you so elegantly put it, is the world. I think that Rehoboam is collecting data. We know that Rehoboam is collecting data and watching human decisions and doing all those things across the entire world, and indeed Rehoboam is also manipulating the entire world. So I think that the world is Rehoboam's simulation that it's toying with to learn and control, whereas Solomon only has these people. But as you say, I guess there might be advantages to if Solomon is running a simulation, because a digital simulation you can do things with that you can't do with the real world. And that was the idea of the cradle in season 2. We had all of these hosts plugged into the cradle, and we're told that this is how hosts, or some hosts, are created, is inside this digital version of Westworld that can be changed and manipulated in certain ways. You can run like multiple different versions, and you can like restart, and you can do things in a loop. And so like a digital simulation like the cradle can be a powerful way of getting data and influencing the minds inside that system. So I suspect that, yeah, that's what's going on inside this facility in season 3. I think that all these people who are plugged in to Solomon, I think it would be cool if they're inside a simulation and they're being manipulated and they're trying to have their brains retrained, just like the AR therapy on crack. Like what was happening to Caleb being plugged in, being edited, maybe that's happening to all these people constantly in here, you know? And it's obviously not working because they're still in there. But maybe something along those lines is being attempted in a digital simulation in an attempt to change these people. But I guess these people are just stubbornly refusing to be edited. Thanks for the super chat from Matt Diff, who says, Charloris made the call before she got blown up. Scenes are a bit out of linear order. Charloris made the call before she got blown up. So I guess you're talking about last episode, and you're talking about how before... hang on. You're talking about how before Charlotte got blown up, she made a call to her family, which was back around here when she was saying, hey, Jake, Nathan, I'm gonna holler at you in a sec. And then she got caught by Serac, and then she escaped, and then she got blown up. I don't see what's out of order about that. I don't think there's any timeline shenanigans going on there. I know that some people were talking about how Charlotte made that call at the start of season 3, episode 3, when she was inside Westworld and she thought she was going to die, and so she said, "Hey Nathan, I love you." And some people have noticed that this, like the lines in this shot, are actually different to what we see later on when Charloris watches the video. And there's actually different lines in this version of the video than the lines that we saw in this version of the video. So some people are like, oh man, there's like timeline shenanigans happening, like it's not actually legit, we've got multiple realities. But I think that's just called editing. Like I think they've just rearranged the lines and they've just used different lines because they wanted to emphasize different things. I don't think it's meant to be a multiple reality thing. But apparently they're saying that the call to Maeve happened before the explosion. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying, my bad. Yeah, okay, I get it. So what you're saying is that when Charlotte in this episode told Clementine and co about the location of Musashi, maybe this actually happened before the events of last season when Charlotte got blown up, and maybe that explains why she's still got her bits attached. Yeah, I think that's a good theory. I don't think it's true, though, because I think her motivations for turning against Dolores are directly related to getting blown up. Like, she says her plan is for Ross to die. I think the reason why she says that is because she's a bit mad about getting Anakin'd last episode. So, I think we are seeing this in linear order. Because, I mean, like the point of what happened last episode was this incredibly emotional turning point in Charlotte's arc. Like we're witnessing her change everything about herself because, you know, she was so wedded to her family and her family was taken from her. I think this is why Charlotte's motivations are going to change dramatically, is because of this unutterably horrible thing that happened to her. So I think that explains her change in deciding to attack the Doloreses in this episode. Thanks for the super chat from Randy, who says, Berlin, de Ford with the reddish orb. So I think Randy's saying that maybe the mysterious individual in Berlin is Ford, and maybe he's in... I mean, the reddish orb that you mentioned, that was Bernard's pearl that we saw earlier. So I don't think it's like secretly Ford's pearl or something. I mean, if you want to get really conspiratorial, maybe the secret thing that Dolores implanted in Bernard's brain when she remade him is Ford, you know? Maybe there's like this latent, hidden Ford mind hidden inside Bernard's mind, like a babushka doll or like a matryoshka doll, as I'm told it's said. Maybe Ford is inside there somewhere, and maybe Dolores has some plan for Ford, and maybe that's why maybe the secret person in Berlin will be revealed to be Ford. That would be fun. And I think, Dolores does have the ability to create people from her memory, so even if she didn't like make a copy of Ford, then she could at least just remember Ford again. And I suppose she's probably spent enough time with Ford to be able to remember him and recreate him. I think that's plausible. So maybe, but I mean, I don't know if Dolores would want Ford to be around, because Ford was her jailer for a long time. Ford kept her in Westworld and kept her suffering. And yes, like the reason why Ford did that is because he wanted to help the hosts become sentient enough to escape. But I don't think Ford is any friend of Dolores's. I mean, if you recall, they did have a slight disagreement at the end of season 1. Dolores has no great love for Ford. Does that look like the face of someone who's going to resurrect Ford? And like, sure, like maybe she's got some galaxy brain plan, but I don't think it's likely that we'll have Ford come back. I mean, the budget went down. I don't know if they can even afford. What's his name? Anthony Hopkins. I don't know if he's going to come back. Yeah, he said he wasn't her friend. That's all right. All right. I think we'll wrap this up pretty soon. But it's been real. I think this was a good episode. I think this was fun. I think there's a lot to talk about in the explained video. I am hoping that we'll get this done a lot sooner than we got the last one done. We got the episode 6 video done barely 24 hours before the next episode came out, and that's a bit ridiculous. So we'll try and get this done as soon as we can. And we have a super chat from Mike V. Mike V says, Season 3's teaser showed a scene with Francis seemingly in a cell talking to Caleb behind glass. Do you think there is more to his story, or was it cut? Yeah, that's a good point. I haven't got that clip to show you, but yeah, for those who don't remember, one of the trailers for Season 3, it did have a shot of Francis talking to Caleb through like a glass wall. And yeah, it sort of looked like a jail, but maybe it was actually one of Sirach's reprogramming facilities or something. I mean, not that Francis... Well, yeah, I mean, Francis must have gone to one of Sirach's reprogramming facilities at some point, so maybe that was Francis talking to Caleb in that facility or something, before they got turned into the outlier hunting assassin people. And yeah, I agree, like maybe it was just cut, because there often are shots in trailers that don't make it into the actual show for one reason or another. But maybe we will see it in the next episode, and we'll learn more about their relationship. Although, you know, it seems like they sort of said what they were going to say about Francis and Caleb. I don't know if we need to learn anything more about them, but maybe we'll find out. Thank you, Rainy HP, who says, why did Sirach not just experiment with the outliers he stored in the refrigeration? The outliers could exist because he didn't have human mind data. I believe Sirach did experiment with the outliers who were stored in the refrigerator, but they were the 9 out of 10 people who didn't respond to the AR therapy that he used on Caleb and stuff. I think these are all the people who are like the rejects who he wasn't able to control and he wasn't able to edit. Looks like it would take an awful lot of resources to put all of these people through that training. But I think that's what we're meant to think happened. But I mean, as you say, like, you know, he doesn't have enough human mind data, because Sirach's motivation this season is that he wants to get the data from the Forge. That's what he told us early on. He wants to get all this human data that was collected from Westworld so that he can improve the amount he can control the world by improving Rehoboam's algorithms, by feeding it more data. So maybe his hope is that once he gets this Forge data, he'll be able to heal and edit all of these people and make them servile to his grand plan, and then they'll get to see the happy little hologram that Sirach included for people to see once they leave, which is kind of hilarious. It's got like a shitty like answering tone sort of a vibe when Sirach is, you know, thinks he's talking to Jean-Mi, but he's actually talking to Dolores and Caleb, who aren't listening to a word he's saying. So you'd think that Sirach could have just put like a simple AI or something in there so that it's aware of what's going on, but he instead just had like the equivalent of like a, you know, 90s answering machine cassette. Okay, anything else you're desperate to have talked about? Chuck it in the chat. There's probably like a dozen things that you guys have been shouting at me that I haven't seen because I can't read all of the chat, but Verdad said that, but Sirach erased all of Delos's data. Yes, Sirach is not interested in most of Delos's data. He doesn't care about the host stuff. He doesn't care about most of it. He specifically only cares about the Forge data. And the Forge data doesn't exist at Delos, doesn't exist in Westworld. It's been uploaded somewhere. Because at the end of Season 2, Episode 10, we specifically had all of... Well, it was weird because we were told that the Sublime data was being beamed somewhere, but apparently the Forge data is now with the Sublime in some unknown satellite or something, but it's all locked up by the encryption key, and so Sirach needs the encryption key to get the Forge data. So, yeah, Sirach doesn't care about most of Delos' stuff, he just cares about the Forge stuff. Maria says, do you think William has a real purpose? And by real, I mean considered by Dolores. I think that Dolores probably does have a plan for William. I think that is probably part of why she sent Bernard to William. And that would obviously have a lot of significance for William, because William through this entire series has been like searching for purpose. That's what we were saying in season 1 at least. And, he wanted Westworld to be real. He wanted there to be stakes. He wanted to be able to kill people, but he also wanted purpose. And maybe Dolores will give him a purpose, but she'll have to convince him not to want to wipe out all the hosts, and that might be difficult. Michael in the chat says, bro, I love your account, but come on, how do you still not realize that those Nazis that Maeve killed were just in the simulation? Yeah, they were just in the simulation, but that doesn't mean that they're not people. People in season 1 were saying, bro, how do you not realize the hosts are just hosts, man? It's okay to kill them because they're just hosts. But then we realized that, guess what? The hosts are actually people, even though they're just robots. And I think that by exactly the same logic, those simulated Nazis might actually just be people all along. I totally agree that it's possible that they're just like hollow, simple AI, just like, video game Nazis who don't feel anything, and so it's fine to kill them. I agree that that's what they're trying to tell us. I agree that that's what the show wants us to assume. I totally get that. All I'm saying is that in a thematic sense, and morally, I think that it's inconsistent, and just kind of a shitty message to say that, we should really stop killing hosts, but don't worry about those simulated Nazis. They're fine. You can slaughter them. I just think it's hypocritical that some people are okay to slaughter and some aren't. The fact that they're Nazis does kind of make it harder to argue that. But they're not really Nazis. And importantly, with the people in those simulations, we did see in, where is it? This shot right here. Look at this shot. These are the mines that are plugged into Sirac's simulation. And you'll notice that they're all pearls. And, the one that Maeve took out of the simulation, the one that was her, it was just one of these random pearls plugged in alongside all these other pearls. So one possibility is that these all of these mines inside the Warworld simulation, they're just the Warworld hosts. Like Maeve, they've just been plugged in. They've been plugged in alongside everyone else. And so they're people just as much as Maeve is. They are Warworld hosts. I think that is probably what they are. What else are all these pearls for? Where do they come from? The other difficult question is, if these are all Warworld hosts, how the fuck did Sirac get them? Because we were told that only a few brains were stolen from Westworld by the mysterious mole. So if that's the case, where did all these fucking pearls come from? I don't know if that even makes sense. Maybe these were pearls that were created by Sirac, and they're not real Westworld hosts or whatever. But still, I just think that fundamentally, it seems like these hosts in Warworld are just as much hosts as anyone else, and therefore slaughtering them seems fucked up. But it's not just the Nazis. It's also the people in Shogun World. Last season, Maeve slaughtered a whole lot of Shogun World hosts who attacked her. So it's self-defense, except Maeve specifically has the power to freeze and control hosts, at least the non-sentient ones. Here she makes one Shogun World host kill the other one. Why did she make them kill each other when she could have just made them stand down and throw away their weapons? Maeve also demonstrated the power to wake hosts to consciousness, like she did to Hector last episode, and like she almost did to Akane in season 2. So I think it is an atrocity for Maeve to have slaughtered all these hundreds or dozens of Shogun World hosts when she could have found a way to not murder them, because these hosts are just as much people as she was when she was beginning her journey to consciousness, So, I don't want to moralize. I know that the answer is we're not meant to think about it, they're just extras, whatever, it's there to look cool, but I still think it's morally inconsistent of Westworld to say that some people matter, some people don't. Okay. Super chat from Ian, who says, have you checked out the Westworld Awakening? It's a VR experience, and it reveals at least another mole for Serac. Really? That's interesting. Yeah, I did hear that there was like a Westworld VR thing. Is that like an app? Like, can you just put that in your Google Cardboard? Because I'm not fancy enough for a fucking Oculus. Yeah, that's interesting. Does it actually... I would be surprised if, like, a VR thing revealed major plot details about Season 3. But, yeah, maybe I should see if I can check that out. And, yeah, the mole thing, I think there was some confusion, but, there was a mole in Charlotte. We're told that the human Charlotte Hale was secretly working for Serac. But we're also told that a mole stole Maeve's pearls, and we now learn Hanayo and Clementine's pearls from Westworld. And presumably that wasn't Charlotte, because Charlotte, as far as we know, was replaced by Dolores before any of that pearl burglary happened. Pearlglary, if you'd like. You probably don't like. So the point is that there's still another mole out there, apparently, or at least there was another mole who wasn't Charlotte. Or maybe that's a plot hole. Maybe the writers just didn't realize that Charlotte can't be the mole and the thief of those... I don't know, whatever. They haven't talked about the mole again since, so maybe the mole is not something we should worry about. Thanks for the super chat from Normasti, the African Warlord. And thanks for the super chat from Knowledge, who says, what if those pearls are in a deviation where Serac is embracing Westworld and Delos, and then Serac learns from the sim, then somehow finds a way to predict the past where he sends Maeve back to stop Dolores? Maybe it's because I've been talking for 2 hours straight, but I'm finding it difficult to pass that sentence. The pearls are in a deviation, like some kind of alternate simulated reality, where Serac embraces Westworld, and then Serac learns from that simulation, and then finds a way to predict the past where he sends Maeve back to stop Dolores. The basic idea, or one of the ideas in that humdinger of a sentence is that there are like these deviant realities, for want of a better term, where like Rehoboam can model... I mean, Rehoboam doesn't just model one reality. Rehoboam models all these different possible realities, possible futures, right? And indeed, possible pasts. It predicts what the past must have been based on present data or on past data and whatever. So the point is that Serac could use those other projected imagined realities in order to better understand, better change his future predictions based on alternate possibilities, is I think what Knowledge is saying by like a deviation. So maybe Serac created an imaginary future where it's like he actually embraced Delos, and then he used that information to better manipulate Maeve and Dolores. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what you're saying. Sorry. Thanks for the super chat from Drize, who says thanks. Thank you, Drize. And thanks, Knowledge. Okay, Knowledge says, where's all those pearls come from? Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. It's almost like I don't remember the things that I literally just said. Okay, alright, so what you're saying, Knowledge, is that all of these pearls that we saw plugged into Serac's Warworld simulation, you're saying that maybe all of this is actually taking place in an imagined reality by Rehoboam, where he's imagining, like, what if I actually made pals with Delos, and this is how he's manipulating Maeve, or something. So this is like a simulation within a simulation, or it's like an alternate simulation. I don't know, man. I don't know. I do still wonder if that, like, sick garden that Serac had was real, because that was so very bucolic, you know, when he eats that apple. I wonder if that's like the steak that guy eats in The Matrix. I don't know. All right. Do you think the Rehoboam circle represents the amount of possible realities that have needed to be simulated in order to arrive at the solid prediction of the future? Thickness means more sims. Yeah, that's a cool idea, Nathan, in the chat. Thickness with 2 C's. Yeah, no, so these circles, they seem to They seem to be more turbulent, more thick, when there is more deviation and more anomalies. And so maybe there needs to be more processing power or more change or more work or more of something in order to get those anomalies back on track. And that's why it's so gosh darn thick. It often appears as spikes. I mean, we had in a trailer spikes that were identified specifically as this spike is the thermonuclear incident in Paris spike, and this spike is where Bernard is in China, and this spike is where Caleb is in Los Angeles. So they do all correspond to individual events, and presumably all these little dots here are their own events and their own deviations. And maybe every person in the world represents a data point along this line, and when everyone's kept in line by Serac, it's like just a perfectly flat, perfectly razor-thin circle. Yeah, I think that's a good theory, Nathan, about what that circle represents. Kenichi says, could red pearls be hosts created based on memories or simulations, like James Delos or New Bernard? Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. Like, maybe the reason why Bernard's pearl is red is not because he's, like, human in the sense that he's part Arnold. Maybe the red pearl just means that it's created through a different process as to what the usual hosts are made from, and maybe because Bernard was made from Dolores's memories, that's why it's red, not necessarily because it's got like human stuff in it. Yeah, I agree. That's a good theory. Thanks for the super chat from Michael, who says, do you think the fifth Dolores could just be a second normal Dolores, an insurance policy in case she died? Yeah, that's a good idea, but here's the thing. They all started out as normal Doloreses. They all started out identically. There is no one real Dolores. They all have changed because we all change, you know? I don't want to blow any minds here, but the moment that Dolores created all these different Doloreses, they were all equally Dolores. The Dolores who... The Musashi Dolores, who was murdered this episode, was just as much Dolores as the main Dolores is. He's just had different experiences and different things have happened to him and different thoughts that have, you know, in some ways made him different. Charlotte, on the other hand, had some pretty major things happen to her that have made her diverge from Dolores even more. But the Dolores that she's diverging from is gone, because, like, even the main Dolores, who we think is like Dolores Prime, she's not the same as the original Dolores who copied. She has had new experiences and changed just as we all do every day, you know. This is probably not blowing any minds, but what I'm trying to get to is that, yeah, there could be another Dolores copy in Berlin, but the experience of sitting around in Berlin while the world is burning down, that might itself be an experience that changes Dolores, you know? I think if you make copies of people, and if those copies experience any difference in what happens in their lives, you would end up with two different people, you know? If you made a clone and then met your clone a year later, that clone would be a different person to you. So I think there kind of is no one real Dolores, and I think that, you know, I agree it makes sense that there might be a backup Dolores in Berlin, but I don't think that backup Dolores would necessarily be identical to this current Dolores, or indeed all of the other current Doloreses. It's a really interesting, like, storytelling thing that, like, you know, we're seeing these different actors playing what was at least originally like the same mind, but you know, we're sort of meant to be able to think that this Charlotte isn't really Charlotte, except she kind of is Charlotte, you know? And this Musashi, like, you know, we're meant to sort of realize that this is Dolores in there. That's Dolores. But we're seeing Musashi, and our brains are just not very good at accepting that someone who looks different is the same, you know? It's not something that our brains have to do very often, because normally what you see is what you get. But, you know, as Hanayo says with Musashi, this is not Musashi at all. This is a corruption and a defacement of the real Musashi. Defacement, quite literally. So, it's interesting. Thanks for the super chat from Amayi, who says, would you ever see a Westworld and Half-Life crossover happen? Will we get episode 3 world? Is the Neolanth the real person in control? Was it a portal storm that destroyed Paris? Damn, those are all some good theories. I think there are a lot of cashed up nerds who would pay a lot of money to go to Half-Life Episode 3 world. I think there's also a lot of nerds who'd pay to go to the Winds of Winter world. God, I'm hoping they don't become synonymous. If the Winds of Winter becomes the Episode 3 of literature. Yeah, there are certain similarities between Half-Life lore. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, Half-Life is a very popular, very critically acclaimed PC video game series from the 90s or early 2000s that was very influential. And Episode 3 never came out, and it was and is one of the most anticipated games of all time, but it never came. There was a new Half-Life game called Alex, like a VR thing that came out, but, you know, who wants to pay $800 to get a VR set to play a sequel to a long-dead series? I don't know. Thanks for the super chat from Andrew, who says, that's not a super chat, this the chat that looked nice, that says, dude, just want to say that as a physicist, your analyses on these episodes are absolutely mind-blowing. The thought put in and complexity of your ideas are intriguing. I appreciate your videos. Thank you, Andrew. That's real nice. I usually avoid reading the really complimentary chats, but thank you so much. There was a chat from Matt, who said, do a video on devs, please. Yeah, so there is this other TV show going on from Alex Garland, who made like Ex Machina and stuff, and devs is apparently about a lot of the same themes that Westworld Season 3 is about. I haven't seen it yet, but once Westworld is over, I'll check it out, and maybe it'll be worth making a video about. Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up now. Thank you all so much for participating. As always, Patreon supporters can watch the live streams after their broadcast, as well as like the live streams from Game of Thrones Season 8, and as well as the some bits and pieces, some other like little half videos that are only for patrons. So you're welcome to check that out, and we're going to start making this explained video, and it's going to be fun. This was a good chat, and keep it real. Cheers. Thank you. Thanks for everyone who gave a super chat. I'm sorry if I didn't get to anyone who gave a super chat, but I think we got most of them, so thanks.